Hi, Mordechai. Good morning. Okay, good to have you back. Okay, so the halacha that we saw yesterday is that even though you're allowed to accept charity from non-observant Jews, there is a tradition that we saw brought down from Rav Sternbach that says that some institutions would only accept from Shomer Shabbos people because they viewed that as the key to their hatzlacha, as the key to their success in their institution. So I was just curious, like, where does that come from, and why do some institutions practice that, and why do some others not? So I just wanted to go through the halacha. I found this sefer called Sefer Mishpatei HaTorah, which brings down practical shilas in halacha, in business halacha. So actually, it's really interesting. It seems to be written very well, and it might be something that we would want to consider doing. This is volume 3, so they've got like a whole bunch of different volumes, and it's written really nicely. And so I was thinking that this might be the one we want to look at after we finish the laws of tzedakah. But in this particular section, the author writes, Mutter lekabel trumos miyehudi sha'adayin hu mechalel Shabbat beparhesia rachmana litzlan. He says it is permitted to accept donations from a Jew who at present, there's adayin means he's still Shabbos violating publicly. Rachmana litzlan, may God save us. In other words, Rachmana litzlan is, sort of like a declaration of, we wish it wasn't so, Bein im hatrumot nitin lutzarach parnasas aniyim. And this is true regardless of what the tzedakah donation is earmarked towards, whether it's for the poor, achzakas Torah supporting Torah study, matarot refuiyot uchadome, or for helping sick people find a cure, and the like. Uveinim taramotan litzarach biniyat beit hakneset. And this is true even if he donated the money for the construction of a shul, yeshiva, mostot chinuch lebanim or lebanot uchadome, any institution for education of boys and girls, etc. Aheter hazeh kayam afilu im hayehudi hanal taram lebeit hakneset menorah paroches sidurim o sifrei limud b'chadome v'rasham et shemo aleihem. This heter holds true even if this Jew who's Mechalel Shabbos b'Parhesia donated to a Beis HaKnesses a specific item that's going to bear his name. So, hey, I don't think, was Joe Tannenbaum a Shomer Shabbos? I think later in his life he might have been. I think he was. But earlier in his life he wasn't. But so this heter holds true whether he's donating generically or whether he's donating for specific items in the shul, like the menorah, the paroches, the sidurim, other svarim, and his name appears on them. Now, where does this come from? So in the footnote, he writes that, whoops, what did I just do? Okay. So in the footnote, he writes, this is Tshuvas Mabit, Uva la halacha b'shach. This is really the shach. The Afal Pisha b'Magen Avram uva Mishnah Brura Naktu Sha'asur lekabel miyehudi mumer lekabel Shabbosos. He says even though the Mishnah Brura brings down from the Magen Avram that it is usher to accept from a Jew who is a mumar, who is machalel Shabbos, and that you're not allowed to earmark chafatzim avor beis hakneses, specific items for the sake of the shul. They do permit, according to the Mishnah Berurah and the Magen Avram, it's okay to accept charity donations from them, but for specific items in the shul, you should not allow that to be done. Ulam bizman hazeh shahayehudim she'inam shomrim Shabbat dinam ketinokot shenishbu. But nowadays, most likely, even the Mishnah Berurah would acknowledge that it's acceptable because most Jews have the status of, or all Jews who are not Shomer Torah have the status of Tinokos Shenishbu. Im kein ein heim nechshavim umarim b'mezid l'chalo Shabbos, ela ka'anusim, o al kol panim kishogigim. We don't look at them as a mumar, as a person who is, knowingly and deliberately violating the Torah, but rather as an anus. It's almost like he doesn't even have any choice in what he's doing, or at least a shogeg where he's not doing it intentionally. And in such an instance, the Gemara Chulin indicates that just the opposite. That it is a mitzvah to accept from them monies to enable them to have the zuchus of doing a mitzvah, or to accept a korban from them. Shedino kibidiyat beit hakneset, which is no different from building a shul. Mishum shebischut hamitzvah hazot yachol lihigarem shehem yachzeru b'tshuva. You never know. Giving a non-observant Jew an opportunity to do a mitzvah might actually spur him to want to do more mitzvahs and eventually become a Baal Tshuva. It's, in other words, a form of kiruv is give people the opportunity to do more mitzvahs and make them feel good about participating in a Jewish cause. The kol shekein shemutar lekalbel mehem kesef lichtivat sefer Torah, v'hu adin sifrei kodesh, and therefore it's certainly permissible to allow them to participate in the writing of a sefer Torah, financially, or for the purchase of other svarim. Sheyichtavu zot al shemam, kemo shemavur sham b'magen Avram u'v'mishnah Berurah b'shem sefer chasidim v'ayin sham, as even the Mishnah Berurah and the Magen Avram point out, in the name of the Sefer Chasidim. So there you have it. This halacha really doesn't in any way place any stringency on whom you may or may not accept donations from. You're actually, in a sense, it's a form of kiruv when you accept charity gifts. Okay. Now, by contrast, you have a tshuva from Rav Sternbach, who's a member of the Badatz. He used to be a Rav in South Africa many years ago. Were you around when he was a rabbi there, Barry? And then he made Aliyah many years ago. We're talking about 50 years ago, I think, at least. And he's become, over the years, he's a brilliant Talmud Chacham. People use his tshuvas for a lot of things, but he's also become very, very charedi, shall we say. And so the she'ela that is asked is, Machalo Shabbos b'Parhesia, shenadav lebeis hakneses, im efshar lichtov shmo al tavla. So a person who's a publicly, flagrantly Shabbos violator, he gives donation to the shul, can you put his name on a plaque? Nira de betoch beit hakneset ein lichtov shemo. He says, Rav Sternbach says, it seems to me that you can't put it inside the synagogue, a plaque with his name on it. She'eino ra'ui lihiyot betoch heichal Hashem. The name of a Machal Shabbos should not be inside the temple of God. Va'ayin b'hagala shulchan aruch orachayim mumar shenasan shayva lebeis hakneses ein mekablin shezeu kemo karban aval avur beis hakneses mekablin. As, and he quotes from the Shulchan Aruch itself, that if a person is a mumar and he donates wax, which is like a specific sacrificial gift, that you do not accept. But if it's for the general fund of the Beis HaKnesses or building the Beis HaKnesses, you can accept. And he quotes the Shach, and the Shach brings the Mabit who is Matir, and he says that there are those who prohibit. He says, "V'hinei yesh me'achronim shemikilim b'machalali Shabbos b'farhesia b'zmanenu sheim toim." He says there are certain achronim that nowadays say that Jews who are not observant are simply just errant. They are Um, they just don't know any better. Like we said, a tinok shenishba. The chil Shabbos bismanenu ein bazeh azus kamo bismanam. He says the chil Shabbos in our day does not involve a sense of chutzpah like it did back then. Rak came begeder tinok shenishba. Ulefiza haya efshar lahakel b'machal Shabbos sherotz l'nadev kishemakirin otoshu be'emet to'eh. And therefore, you could certainly, according to those achronim, you have a basis to accept any kind of gift, because if you recognize that this person is not doing it maliciously, it's just his lifestyle, and he doesn't know any better. And he wants to donate to this orthodox cause. He says it's clear that even though the Orthodox are a minority of Jews and he wants to participate, so you see that he doesn't have anything, he's not like a maliciously anti-religious, so why not accept his gift? He says, V'ha'emeti she'imerachakim toim ka'elu anu gormim sheyitrachku yoter v'yoter. And as Rav Sternbuch himself acknowledges, that if we were to distance them by rejecting their gift, we would cause them to be even more distant from Judaism. Aval keshanu mekarvim otam yitachein sheyoil afilu livneim sheyitkarvu yoter. He says, by accepting their gift and making them feel that we're close to them, this might cause even not only them, but their children also to feel a sense of closeness to Yiddishkeit. Uvenidon didan she'ein biyad hakeilah ha'emtzaim livnot me'atzmam uzikakim b'nidavot elu. And so in a situation where a person's building a shul, a community's building a shul, they don't have the resources just among themselves, these few families of Shomerei Shabbos who want to put together a shul. And so they need gifts to come from outside the Orthodox community. Dati lahatir b'toim ka'elu. It's my opinion that you can be lenient and accept the gifts of these errant Jews. Avalo yihiyeh rashum shmo b'toch beit hakneset kebal beit hakneset shekedushata kemo azara. Just that you shouldn't put a plaque with their names inside the shul of those people who are not Shomer Shabbos. He says, because it's like putting it inside the temple. And he says that you shouldn't do. Lachei na'eh hadavar v'ya'eh linhog shelo lichtov betoch beit hakneset shum shem klal af midatiyim. But he says, but out of sensitivity, you shouldn't allow any names of donors to appear inside the sanctuary itself. Okay, rak b'chutz b'prozdor or b'chutz legamra yichtavu al shelet. He says, therefore, the best way to do this is to put the name of the donor either in the hallway outside the sanctuary, or to put it on the outside of the building. V'im yedu kulam shebifnim ein kotvim klal hashemot, azay yaskimum sheshmam yofia b'chutz. And that way, you're not discriminating between donors. And if the donor, the non-observant donor, sees that no one's name is going inside, and that the convention for your synagogue is that the names only go on the outside, you won't have any problem. And he says, and therefore, you can permit the non-observant Jews to be participants, put their names on the plaques, and hopefully that'll bring them closer to Yiddishkeit. Then he says, however, Im yecholim livnot beit hakneset, that bless you, bekesef sheba mishomrei Shabbos davka, ashrei chelkam. If you can indeed build a shul without the participation of non-observant Jews, even better. In other words, how fortunate is your community if they can accomplish that? Ba'ayin Gemara Reish Perek Zayin the Metzia b'Mais the Rebbe Chia v'vuar Ketzad Diktek b'Tahara b'Limud Hatinokos. He says, because we know from a story about Rebbe Chia how meticulous he was about the purity of learning with children. In other words, he wanted to make sure that the children did not have any compromise in the quality of their Torah study. Umekubal biyadenu mipi hagra zatzal shesegula nifla'a shetfilot bebeit hakneset yu b'tarat hamachshava b'sheyitkabalu. The Gra wrote that that if you want to make sure that the prayers taking place in your synagogue will have the finest and the best kavana, and that all of the thoughts will be pure, that the prayers will be accepted in your synagogue, that's when they build the shul, that the intentions of the donors who are building the shul will be for the sake of heaven. So he says that's a way that on a spiritual level, you'll guarantee that the shul's continuity and the prayers that are recited inside the shul will be of a higher caliber. V'shem hagrach mibrisk zatzal she'im hayeshivas hayu mekablim rakesef b'tahara v'hashutzvim l'tarasim hayu yureim u'shleimim. Reb Chaim Brisker was of the opinion that if the yeshivas would only accept money that was donated with purity, meaning that all of the donors are God-fearing Jews and are complete in their observance, hayu gedelim harbe yoter b'torah v'yiras Hashem tahora. That these institutions would only become greater, and they would increase Torah study and more fear of God. Uva'avonosenu harabim lo zachinu lekach ela miuta demiuta. Only a small, select few institutions have had this privilege of being able to support themselves exclusively with money from observant Jews. V'shamati mimori v'Rebbe Hagon Hatzadik Reb Moshe Schneider Zatzal. I heard this from my Rebbe, who apparently must have known the Chafetz Chaim. Shehakadosh HaChafetz Chaim Zatzal bikesh yitrmu liyeshivasa rak shomrei Shabbos. His personal request that the yeshiva in Radin should only take donations from Shabbos observant people. She'ilu acherim lo lahem v'lanu livnot beit Elokeinu. What is that? Bikesh rak shom liyeshiva rak shomrei Shabbos. She'ilu acherim lo lahem v'lanu livnot beit Elokeinu. He says he didn't want outsiders to build the house of God. Umori v'Rebbe hikbed al zeh ma'od v'hishtadel shelo lekabel mehem shelidvarav hatzlachas hayeshiva talui bazeh. And he said that his Rebbe, the Chafetz Chaim, was very careful about this, and he felt that the hatzlacha of the yeshiva would be dependent upon not accepting gifts from people who were not Shomer Shabbos. V'shamati gam al hadmor hakadosh Reb Aaron Rokeach Zatzal mi Belza, kasher pasach yeshiva amar sheli yikablu trumos ela mishomer Shabbos davka v'hainu mehatam shehevein. And I heard the same thing about the Belzer Rebbe, that he would only accept from Shomer Shabbos, and he felt that that was the key to the hatzlacha of the yeshiva. So is this elitist? You betcha. It's certainly an approach, right? That we want the highest caliber of kedusha to permeate our institution, and so therefore we will only accept donations from God-fearing Jews who are Shomrei Torah and mitzvahs, and we feel that that will directly impact the nature of the quality of the Torah study. Okay. So I'm a bit cynical. You know me by now, a bit of a cynical Jew, and maybe that's my problem. And I don't mean to share my cynicism with others, but I must say that this does not resonate with me. And not only does it not resonate with me, but I don't think that it's practical to. It's not only counterproductive. The point that I want to make is very, very wealthy Orthodox Jews may be extremely observant in one area of observance, but maybe not very observant in other areas of observance. And what I mean is, when it comes to laws of Choshen Mishpat, as far as making sure that there are God-fearing Jews who accomplish both. Like, my understanding is that the Reichman family are very, very meticulous in Choshen Mishpat matters. And in addition to being Shomer Shabbos and God-fearing and so forth and so on. So this is not to cast aspersions on anyone. But I think that if a person were to want to make sure that the caliber of the spiritual caliber of his institution was on a very high level, I would probably not be looking at whether or not the guy comes in with how he's dressed, or that he's Shomer Shabbos, or he davens in the shtibel. I'd want to know that his business is on the up and up, and that he's not doing things that are unethical in order to be able to make more money. And that's not something that can be ascertained that easily. But if that's indeed the concern of the institution, then it's like you'd have to really investigate the person. And so if that,
Shul that I know of, I'm not sure about Yehuda, they all had non-observant Jews in the Orthodox faith that were part of it, were builders of it, and everything else. But to carry that though, but you can't take words of a Chametz Chaim lightly either, right? I mean, there's somebody who we constantly is the source of our
yeah. I remember the Chafetz Chaim didn't live in Toronto, right? He was in Radin in Poland, and it was a different world, just a totally different world. The pre-war Poland is not the same. It's not the same place. So I guess I showed. Yeah. So this is a contrast, right? The top sefer basically says, if anything, encourage non-observant Jews to donate to your institution, because this will be makarev them. Oh yeah. Rav Sternbach is living in a different milieu. He's living in Mea Sharim, and he's also from South Africa. And so his view is, and maybe it depends on who your audience is, that if an institution can afford, so first of all, he says, don't allow a Machal Shabbos's name to appear inside the sanctuary, where we don't, that's his personal opinion. We don't see anyone who has objected to that, who has said not to do that. This is Reb Sternbach's personal opinion. And then he said that how fortunate an institution would be, especially of higher learning, if they could only accept from Shomerei Shabbos, and there are a very small number of institutions who succeed in that. But he acknowledges that's not halachic. But it's just it's extra halachic if an institution wants to make sure that it has the highest level of spiritual strength. So it's a different world. It's a different world from ours, Moish. Okay, Sefer Dovev Mesharim also is written. Let's see, Tafshin Chaf Bey is written in the 70s. This Sefer. Al davar she'elatoi mutar lekabel nadav letzarch binyan tal mutar b'mechal Shabbos sherotz lenadev le'aliyas nishmas aviv shahaya yirei shamayim. So you have a guy who's not observant. His father was Orthodox, and he wants to donate to the shul in memory of his father. In a be'ikar hadin kvar hevi kvod Torah so meshulchan aruch sim kuf mendalas if yud aleph shemavur b'ramah sham demumar la'aklam ein mekabel mimenu ner lahadliko. He says, well, we know the Ramah. The Ramah says that you're not allowed to accept donations from a mumar for specific items in the synagogue. Uvemagen Avram Sham Mishum Dedami LeKarban. And the Magen Avram says that it's because it's like accepting a korban from a mummer. And just like in the temple, we didn't accept karbanos from mumrim, we don't accept them for specific items in the shul. And that logic would dictate that you can't even accept, therefore, from a mummer who's mechalel Shabbos. And by the way, he hasn't yet quoted the Shach, but he will in a second. Tzion mea sefer Chasidim, the Sefer Torah Shari Lekabel, and then you quote that you're allowed to accept a Sefer Torah donation from a mummer. Gami Yoredeus min Reishon Dalev, the Mavur B'Ramadin Mekabel min Amumr LeBeis HaKnesses. Even, and that's true even according to the Shach. V'Shach Sham Shebeshuvas Hamabit Matu Lekabel L'Binyan Beis HaKnesses Delo Dami LeKarban. The Shach, however, permits you to accept general donations from a mummer for the building of a shul. V'hamachzis hashekel sham haven bekavanas hamagin Avram dahasefer chasidim v'hamabit cholkin al ramah disfir lehu dein lekabel mimummer lebeis hakneses lo kedas hachachmas adam muva bisteichemed kavanas haramah hu rak b'davar shadom lekarban aval lebinyan beis hakneses gam haramah svir lekedas hamabit d'shari lekabel ad kan devara. He says that there is one way of looking at this. Actually, there's two ways of looking at this. Either that there's no machlokes, this is what the Chachmas Adam says. It's really that it's two different kinds of donations. For specific items like a paroches or a ner tamid, there the Ramah would hold that you're not allowed to accept for those specific items because that's like a korban. But a general donation to the shul from a mummer, you could accept. The other way of understanding it is that no, there's no difference, and it's a machlokes in the Achronim as to whether you can accept from a mummer for any synagogue purpose. In a b'pshitus nira yoser kedivrei hamachzis hashekel, the harama machmir gam lebinyan beis hakneses v'sefer Torah. It seems to me that the proper way of understanding it is that the Ramah is completely machmir and would never allow a mummer to donate at all. And then, we're running out of time. He says, let's see if let me just cut to the chase. He says, Ularavcha demilsa efshel hasbir lahanadiv shelatovas hanifter hu sheyiska hamos la'aviv labinyan hatalmud Torah. He says, first of all, he also wants to make a distinction between a Torah institution and a synagogue, because a Torah institution is not exactly like bringing a korban, right? But you're supporting Torah study. It's a different cause, and therefore maybe there's more reason to be lenient. But he says you still may want to ask the donor to make this money your deceased father, or dedicate the money to your deceased father in his memory, and then we'll accept the donation. So I don't know how that's even going to help if your father's already deceased. It sounds a little bit bizarre what he's suggesting. The Imkain, he says, "Bevadei havikilu ha'ab zachal mitzvahs binyan hatalmud Torah be'ein shum chashash klal chas v'shalom." He says, and therefore, in that situation where he's donating it in memory of his observant father, there's certainly no problem. The gam kefi michtav kvod toraso hachanus shelo skura b'Shabbos kodesh gam lamidus b'no Torah v'yesh lo emuna al kein chas v'shalom laduno l'rachko. And he says, and certainly in your case, where you're describing this donor as being a machal Shabbos, but who keeps his store closed on Shabbos, and he sends his son to yeshiva, and he believes in God. Therefore, God forbid you should not judge him harshly or try to distance him in any way. So he says, "Bi'ikar hadavar da'ati noteh ledas kvod taraso sheme'anachon lekabel mimenu mibelil lekapeach zchus aviv zal b'mitzvahs talmud Torah shel hatinokos beis rabban zuchuzu tamud gam livno sheyashu b'vaday yashpia alav l'tova." He says, and therefore you should accept the donation. It'll help him become closer to Hashem. It'll help his son in yeshiva. And Chvod Kedushasa B'vadei Yesh B'Elav Tova, and you'll certainly be able to have a good hashpah on the donor. So you've got two different approaches. You've got the approach of being machmir because you want to sanctify everything in your institution, but that's a minority opinion. The prevailing opinion is, without any hesitation, accept the donations from the donor without any restrictions. And we'll hold it here for today, and we'll continue tomorrow.